For years, the Canadian government has been telling a tale of a fair, open competition to pick our next fighter jet. It was a long and winding road, or so they said, a promise that every taxpayer dollar would be scrutinized and every option weighed. A story of a rigorous head-to-head battle between the American F-35 Lightning II and the Swedish Saab Gripen. It was all about replacing our ancient CF-18 Hornets with the best plane at the best price. But what if that story wasn't the whole story? What if, behind the curtain of public debates and political promises, the real decision was made years ago? What if secret payments and backroom realities meant Canada's choice was locked in, long before the public was ever told? This is the story of how Canada committed to buying the F-35, while the world watched a competition that never really stood a chance. This is the story of a secret deal hiding in plain sight. To get what's really going on, you have to go back. The saga of replacing Canada's CF-18 Hornets is a multi-decade epic of political gymnastics, broken promises, and budgets that just kept getting bigger. The Hornets, the workhorses of the Royal Canadian Air Force, have been flying since the 1980s. They're tired, their frames are stressed, their tech is generations old, and just keeping them airborne is a massive effort. Everyone in Ottawa agreed they had to be replaced. The only question was, with what? The F-35 was always seen as the heir apparent. The previous Conservative government under Stephen Harper was an early, enthusiastic partner in the American-led Joint Strike Fighter program, the multi-trillion-dollar project that birthed the F-35. In 2010, they announced a plan to buy 65 jets without a competition. But that plan blew up spectacularly. The Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General dropped bombshell reports that exposed the government's lowball cost estimates and the true eye-watering lifetime expense. The F-35 became a toxic symbol of government waste. Enter Justin Trudeau. In 2015, his Liberal Party ran hard on a promise to kill the F-35 deal. "We will not buy the F-35 stealth fighter bomber," he said over and over. It worked. It was a promise that hit home with a public sick of the cost and controversy. Instead, he promised an open, fair, and transparent competition to find a cheaper replacement. And so, the Future Fighter Capability Project, or FFCP, began. It was sold as the perfect model of responsible military buying. The list of contenders was eventually narrowed to two finalists: the Lockheed Martin F-35A, the very jet Trudeau swore he'd never buy, and the Saab JAS 39 Gripen E, a sleek, modern fighter from Sweden. The government insisted it was a meticulous, points-based evaluation of capability, cost, and economic benefits. For years, the F-35 and Gripen were pitted against each other. Gripen fans said it was more practical and affordable, perfect for defending Canada's massive Arctic territory, and cheaper to fly. Plus, Saab offered to build the jets right here in Canada, creating thousands of high-tech jobs. F-35 supporters fired back, pointing to its advanced stealth, its revolutionary sensor network, and the fact that nearly all of Canada's closest allies were buying it. Flying the F-35, they argued, meant being part of the most advanced air defense network on the planet. The debate was everywhere, and the government assured everyone repeatedly that the competition was wide open. The best jet would win. That was the official story. While Ottawa was putting on this grand show of a public competition, something else was happening behind the scenes. While ministers talked about a level playing field, officials were signing checks. And not for office supplies. They were for the F-35. In early 2026, news broke that the Canadian government had been quietly making payments to the U.S. for long lead components for 14 additional F-35 jets. This was on top of the first 16 aircraft already ordered and paid for. The news landed with a thud because it seemed to completely contradict the government's public stance. So, what are long lead components? In the world of high-tech manufacturing, they're the parts that take the longest to make. Think specialized structural parts, unique airframe forgings, and complex electronics that have to be ordered years before a jet is assembled. The F-35 isn't built in one place, it's a global operation. To get a spot in that production line, a country has to put money down years in advance. If you miss your window, you go to the back of a very long line. This is the key. By paying for long lead parts for 14 more jets, the government was securing its place in the production schedule for a total of 30 aircraft. You don't spend hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on custom-built parts for a plane you're just thinking about buying. The action itself is a commitment. This all happened while the government of Prime Minister Mark Carney was conducting a review of the full 88-jet purchase, a review launched in 2025 because of trade tensions with the United States. When pressed on these new payments, the government's language got slippery. Defense Minister David McGuinty insisted the review was still underway, but didn't deny the payments were happening. The Prime Minister framed the spending as a way of keeping Canada's options open and maintaining negotiating leverage. But the money trail told a different story. The review wasn't really about whether to buy the F-35s, but about how to manage the politics of a decision that, for all practical purposes, was already made. If the competition was mostly for show, why bother? Why spend years and millions on a process if the outcome was already baked in? The answer is a powerful 1-2 punch: geopolitical necessity and industrial reality. Let's start with geopolitics. Canada's defense is tied at the hip to the United States. The foundation of this is NORAD, the joint command that has defended North American airspace since the Cold War. On top of that, Canada is in the Five Eyes, the world's most exclusive intelligence sharing club, with the US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And what do all these partners have in common? They all fly the F-35. The F-35 is more than a plane. It's a flying networked data hub. It's designed to be the key node in a web of allied defenses. Choosing a different jet would be like showing up to a 5G-connected office with a flip phone. You're technically there, but you're not really in the network. The U.S. made this brutally clear, with officials warning that if Canada backed away from the F-35, it could alter the NORAD partnership. The implied threat was that the U.S. might have to fly its own F-35s into Canadian skies to defend the continent, a huge blow to Canadian sovereignty. For the Royal Canadian Air Force, the pressure was immense. But if geopolitics was the chain, Canadian industry was the lock. The second, and maybe even stronger force, was a brilliant strategy of economic integration that started decades ago. Canada began investing in the Joint Strike Fighter program way back in 1997, becoming a formal partner in 2002. This gave Canadian companies the right to bid on contracts to build parts for the entire global fleet of F-35s. And it worked. Today, every single F-35 that rolls off the line, whether it's for the U.S. Marines or the Japanese Air Force, has Canadian-made parts inside. We're talking about an estimated $3.2 million worth of Canadian content in every jet. Over 110 Canadian companies have been part of this. By early 2025, the program had already brought over $3.3 billion USD in contracts to Canadian industry. Lockheed Martin projects the F-35 program will generate over $15.5 billion for Canada's economy over its lifetime. This is the industrial lock-in. For more than 2 decades, Canada built a huge part of its aerospace sector around the F-35. Backing out would mean telling thousands of skilled Canadian workers their jobs were on the line. No government could easily walk away from that. We were so woven into the F-35's fabric that pulling ourselves out would have been an act of economic self-harm. So if the deck was stacked for the F-35, what about the Saab Gripen? Was it a real contender or just a political prop to make the fight look fair? On paper, the Gripen's case was strong. It's a modern, highly capable fighter, praised for its agility. Saab's pitch was perfectly tuned to Canada. They said the Gripen was way cheaper to buy and fly, a big deal for a country nervous about huge defense bills. They played up its Nordic roots, calling it a jet built for the cold, perfect for our unforgiving Arctic. And the biggest carrot? Saab promised to reinvest every dollar spent back into Canada's economy and even set up a final assembly line here. It was a vision of technological independence, a direct contrast to the American-controlled F-35. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. In late 2025, Radio Canada reported on a leaked confidential D&D evaluation from 2021, and it painted a devastating picture for the Swedes. According to those reported rankings, the competition wasn't even close. In the overall assessment of military capabilities, the F-35 reportedly scored 95%, the Gripen E just 33%. In a category judging the plane's ability to defend North America, the F-35 scored a staggering 97% to the Gripen's 22%. Critics cried foul, suggesting the rules were written for the F-35. They argued that key advantages like the Gripen's lower operating costs might have been downplayed in favor of high-end features Canada might rarely use, but the core technical gap was hard to ignore. The Gripen isn't a stealth aircraft. In an age of advanced air defenses, stealth is considered a must-have for survival. The F-35's stealth and its revolutionary sensor network put it in a different league. As one former RCAF general put it, the numbers simply confirmed there was no real contest. The requirements for a top-tier fighter for the 21st century, stealth, network integration, and supreme situational awareness, were things only the F-35 could truly deliver. The Gripen was a ghost in the machine, a contender in name only. This long political charade comes with a price, and the Canadian taxpayer is footing the bill. The illusion of a competition served a political need, but it couldn't change the financial reality. From the start, the numbers have been mind-boggling. The initial purchase price for 88 jets was pegged at $19 billion. But that's just the sticker price. The true life cycle cost includes everything else: new hangars, simulators, spare parts, and decades of fuel and maintenance. A 2023 report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer put the total lifetime cost for the F-35 fleet at a jaw-dropping $74 billion. Even before the main deal was done, costs were creeping up, with D&D reporting hundreds of millions in extra spending. This is a classic pattern in Canadian military projects. The F-35, with its insane complexity, is no different. But here's the paradox. Despite the staggering price tag, internal analysis still concluded the F-35 was the most cost-effective option. How is that possible? It comes back to that industrial trap. The Gripen might be cheaper per jet, but Canada would have had to pay a fortune to build a whole new support system from scratch. New production lines, new training centers, a separate supply chain. On top of that, choosing the Gripen meant walking away from billions in guaranteed F-35 work for Canadian companies. When you factor all that in, the math flips. The F-35 became the cheapest option because for 20 years, we'd already been paying to make it that way. It was a sunk cost fallacy on a national scale. So the deception was twofold. The public was told there was a real choice when geopolitics and economics had already decided for us. And the government, following a long, troubled tradition, has likely been downplaying the true long-term financial hit. The public debate was about the $19 billion sticker price, while the much bigger $74 billion sustainment cost was buried in the fine print. And that number will almost certainly grow. So, what's your take? Was this whole elaborate process a necessary evil? A bit of clever political maneuvering to protect Canada's security and our aerospace industry? Or was it a betrayal of public trust? A multi-billion-dollar decision made in secret? Was the F-35 really the only choice? Or was it just the choice we were forced into? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like deep dives that go past the headlines to show how these huge decisions really get made, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Looking back at Canada's winding fighter jet journey, one conclusion is unavoidable. The decision to buy the F-35 wasn't made in 2023 when the government made the final announcement. It wasn't made during the years of the so-called open competition. The deal was effectively sealed decades ago, pre-written by the cold logic of geopolitics and the powerful gravity of industrial integration. The public competition was little more than political theater. It was a necessary show for a government that had famously promised never to buy the F-35. It created the appearance of choice where very little existed. It was also a handy bargaining chip in tense trade talks with the U.S., a way for Ottawa to hint that its cooperation shouldn't be taken for granted, even as its actions proved otherwise. The final proof is in the quiet payments for the next batch of jets. Those transactions, made while the government publicly insisted a review was ongoing, exposed the truth. They showed that behind the curtain, the real plan was rolling forward, uninterrupted. Canada didn't just choose the F-35. In many ways, the F-35 program chose Canada, weaving our industry and our military so deeply into its global DNA that any other path became almost unthinkable. The government has spent years just trying to manage the political fallout of a decision that was, for all intents and purposes, inevitable. And the Canadian public was left watching a race where the winner was picked long before the starting gun ever fired.